Chapter 20 Home Again. As the company rode back to the Great Ark, Alex thought about everything that had happened to him. The adventure had lasted little more than a year and a half, but almost everything was different now. He wondered when he would be able to find a new adventure to go on, and if any of his friends would be able to join him. When they rode past the Troll's Stream, Alex looked toward the hills. He knew that the stone troll would still be there, and part of him wanted to see it again. "You seem strangely quiet, Alex," Archon observed that night as they ate. "Oh, just thinking," answered Alex.
"Thinking how you'll spend your fortune, no doubt,"
Skeld commented with a laugh. "No," said Alex, "just wishing the adventure wasn't over."
"It's not really over,"
said Thrang.
"After all, you've still got to meet with Waylon Vankin and learn to be a true wizard."
"I suppose so," Alex admitted, "but it won't be the same." "Because he won't have Thrang's cooking to keep him going," Tayo laughed happily.
"Nor a pair of jokers who don't know when they're well off,"
Thrang replied. Alex laughed, happy to be with his friends. He tried not to think about leaving them to go back to his old life. He thought it would be the hardest thing he'd done so far. "Don't worry," said Andy, throwing a biscuit at Tayo. "I'm sure we'll all meet again." Alex smiled at Andy's words, and then joined in the sudden biscuit battle that broke out. Thrang yelled madly at them for wasting food, but that only made him a target for everyone else. Their last days in Vargland passed quickly, and Alex realized Thrang was right. His adventures were only just beginning. He had the package from Waylon Vankin to open when he got home, and he was looking forward to that. He also needed to meet with Waylon, and that might be quite an adventure all by itself. They finally reached the Great Arch, and as they rode through it, the dismal colors of fall magically turned into the happy greens of spring. The lands around Telos seemed to be exactly the same as when they'd left. They arrived in Telos in time for a midday meal at the Golden Swan. After lunch, Bregnest left to arrange for their rooms and to order an evening feast. Andy and Alex wandered into the streets of Telos, leaving the others talking happily in the bar. "I want to see the bag maker," Andy said. "I need to add a couple of rooms to my bag. And you can ask him about the 6 lost bags while we're there." Alex quickly agreed. The thought of returning the lost bags gave him hope for new adventures. "Ah, gentlemen," said the bag maker when Alex and Andy walked through the door. "What can I do for you today?" "Quite a bit, I hope," answered Alex. "Oh? Had some good fortune on your last adventure, did you?" "Yes, we did," said Andy. "We both would like to add some rooms to our bags." "Excellent," replied the bag maker. "Do you know which rooms you would like to add?" Andy ordered 5 new rooms for his bag, though he had only planned on 3. The bag maker handed Andy's bag back to him and then turned to Alex. "Now, what can I do for you?" "I would like a bathroom, a bedroom, an ice room, and a library added to my bag," answered Alex. "Very good," said the bag maker. "All useful rooms, to be sure." It didn't take long to add the rooms to Alex's magic bag, and Alex wondered how hard it might be to learn that bit of magic. The bag maker smiled as he accepted his money from Andy and Alex. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" "Yes, there is, actually," said Alex. "On my last adventure, I was able to recover several lost magic bags. I was hoping you could tell me who they belonged to, and where their families or heirs might be found." "Of course," answered the bag maker. "Returning lost bags is a great honor. I will be happy to tell you all that I can. Please, if I may see the bags you've recovered, I can write you a list of heirs and locations." "Thank you, that would be most helpful," said Alex. It didn't take long for the bag maker to identify the owners of the lost magic bags, but it did take him some time to find the named heirs and to write everything down. Alex was happy to wait. At least now he would have some idea of where the heirs of the lost bags might be found, and that might lead him to future adventures. Alex and Andy returned to the Golden Swan in time for the company's final feast, which was a long and happy event. They joked and laughed late into the night until Bregnest finally insisted that they all go to bed.
We will meet as a company in the morning to divide what is left of the share for expenses,
Bregnest said.
I have already delivered the share that was set aside for the Widows and Orphans Fund, though you may wish to make your own contributions as well. Then we will declare our agreement fulfilled and our adventure at an end.
Alex went to bed both happy and sad, knowing that tomorrow the company would be no more. As he slept, he dreamed of his friends in Vargland. He saw Ionon in her tower, and Osric on his stone throne. He could hear Thrain pestering Osric to let him go on an adventure, and he wondered what the oracle had said to Melnock and Nittic. Last of all, he dreamed of Callisto in the dark woods. He wondered when he would see her again. When Andy shook him awake the next morning, his sorrows were gone and he felt happier than he had in weeks. He knew one day he would return to Vargland and see all his friends again. At breakfast, Tayo and Skeld were already teasing Thrang about his retirement, asking how they could survive their next adventure without such a good cook. Thrang insisted he was too old for adventures, and it was time to settle down, but his smile seemed to say he was just joking.
It is time to divide the last of the share set aside for expenses,
said Bregnest loudly, so the others would stop making so much noise.
I have decided to divide it evenly between us. There are 2 reasons for this. First, because you have been a wonderful company and have made a first-class adventure.
The company exploded in cheers at Bregnest's decision and praise.
The second reason,
Bregnest said, holding up his hands for quiet,
is because I know our young wizard would complain loudly if I tried to give more to him than to the rest of us. So, to keep him happy, we will share equally.
Another cheer went up from all of them, and Alex blushed as Bregnest bowed to him with a smile and a wink. Bregnest had already sorted and divided the remaining treasure into 8 large piles, which the company found waiting for them in a room at the back of the inn. After they had stored their treasure, Bregnest led them out of the Golden Swan and across the road to a large building where they could make their donations to the Widows and Orphans Fund. Alex had read about the fund in the Adventurer's Handbook, so he had a good idea of how much he should give. He hoped it wouldn't be more than Bregnest's donation, because if he gave more than the company's leader, it would be an insult. Bregnest was generous, and Alex was relieved that he could give as much as he had planned. The company wandered off through the streets of Telos. There were a few hours left before the midday meal, and Alex asked Archon and Thrang to come with him to the bookshop. He wanted their advice on some new books about adventures and magic. When they returned to the Golden Swan for their final meal together, the mood was somber and a little sad. There was little joking as everyone was thinking about how much they would miss each other and what they would do next.
It is time,
Bregnest said at last.
If there are no questions or disputes, we will call our agreement complete.
I have a question, Alex said suddenly, remembering something.
And what is that?
Bregnest asked. Archon mentioned once that you were trying to fulfill a prophecy on this adventure, Alex said. Can you tell us what that prophecy was, or is? Bregnest smiled and laughed softly to himself.
I wasn't really sure it would be fulfilled on this adventure, he said. That is why I didn't tell you about it at the beginning of our quest. However, I see that the prophecy has partly come true, so I will tell you what I can.
Bregnest paused for a long moment.
The prophecy was given to me many years ago, and I was never sure it was a true prophecy, he said slowly.
Enough,
Thrang said loudly.
Just tell us what it is.
Very well, Master Silversmith, said Bregnest. I was told that I would find a great wizard on my adventures. A wizard who would also be a warrior, though he would not know of his talents when I found him. The prophecy said I would help him find the path he should follow, and that he would go on to do many great and noble deeds.
That seems to have come true in part then.
said Thrang, smiling at Alex.
As soon as young Alex goes on another adventure, it may come true completely.
Indeed,
Bregnest agreed, raising his mug to toast Alex. The others all followed his example. Alex went pink, but smiled and raised his own mug as well.
I declare our agreement fulfilled and our adventure at an end,
said Bregnest after the toast.
Some of you will be leaving when we finish here, and the rest of us will leave in the morning. Until we meet again, I wish you all a fond farewell.
Until we meet again, the company repeated. There were many goodbyes and promises to visit each other in distant lands. Alex promised to visit everyone, though he had no idea how to find any of his friends once they left Telos. Andy, Skeld, and Tayo were leaving that afternoon, and Alex joined the others in front of the Golden Swan to say goodbye once more. Tayo pulled Alex to the side as the others crowded around Skeld and Andy to say their farewells. I owe you more than the others will ever know, said Tayo. If ever you have need, please feel free to call on me. You are most kind, my friend, replied Alex. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. Tayo pulled Alex into a huge bear hug, squeezing him so tight Alex thought for a moment that his ribs would break. When Tayo released him and pulled away, Alex saw tears of happiness in Tayo's eyes.
Farewell,
Bregnest called as Andy, Skeld, and Tayo rode away.
May we meet again soon.
Once the three warriors were out of sight, Alex went back into the Golden Swan with his remaining companions. He was just wondering when he would see his departed friends again, when he suddenly thought of something else. How am I going to get home? He said out loud as the thought occurred to him.
Oh, you needn't worry,
laughed Thrang.
Bregnest, Archon, and I will be coming with you to Clutter's shop.
You will? Alex asked in surprise.
Course we will,
Thrang laughed.
Bregnest needs to pay Clutter his share for the adventure, and Archon and I have to update everyone's files.
What files? Alex questioned.
The adventure shop keeps records about all adventurers. After each adventure, one or two of the company are chosen to update the files on themselves and the other adventurers. And I don't mind saying, we'll have a fair bit of work updating your file.
Another thought occurred to Alex. What about Cherie? He didn't want to leave his horse behind, but he had no idea what he would do with a horse back at the Happy Dragon. Not to mention how he would explain how he had gotten a horse if he took Cherie home with him.
You can stable her here,
Thrang suggested.
The Swan keeps a good stable, and the price is fair. And if you leave her here, she'll be waiting when you go on your next adventure.
Alex was relieved, and he left his companions at once to make arrangements for Cherie's care. He stopped by her stall to say goodbye, at least for a little while. She seemed to understand when he told her he was going home, but she was staying there. She looked sad, but nuzzled Alex's shoulder in her own farewell. The next morning, Alex ate breakfast with Bregnest, Archon, Thrang, and Halfton. It was a quiet affair without Skeld and Tayo's jokes or Andy's laughter. When they finished, Halfton said goodbye to Alex and made him promise to come visit as soon as possible. Halfton would be waiting at the Golden Swan for Thrang to return so the two of them could journey home together.
If you're ready, then,
said Thrang. I suppose I am, said Alex, though I wish I could start another adventure now that I've been on one.
I doubt you will have to wait for long,
Thrang replied.
Wizards are always wanted on adventures. Plus, you've got your meeting with Vankin to look forward to.
And your home may be different than you remember it, now that you've been on an adventure, said Archon. Alex nodded and smiled. He waved goodbye to Halfton as he and the others made their way along the streets of Telos. Almost before he knew it, they were standing in the same field he had arrived in so long ago. There was no sign of a magic door, however, and he wondered how they would get back into the adventurer's shop. Mr. Clutter should be opening the door any time now, said Archon. I sent him a jeeb telling him what time we'd be arriving. Almost as soon as Archon had finished speaking, the silver outline of a door appeared in front of them. The door opened slowly, and the four of them stepped into Mr. Clutter's shop. "Well then," said Mr. Clutter, smiling, "back already, are you?"
We've had a fair bit of luck,
replied Thrang, moving into the room.
Our young first-timer here proved more valuable than we bargained for.
"Ah, Mr. Taylor," said Mr. Clutter happily. "So glad to see you again. I received a message for you just this morning. Let me see, where did I put that?" Mr. Clutter searched his desk and produced an envelope. "Ah, here we are. As I said, just arrived this morning. Very exciting, I must say." Alex took the letter from Mr. Clutter. His name was written on the front of the envelope in large red letters. Alex wondered if it was an invitation to join another adventure already, or perhaps a message from one of his friends in Vargland. The back of the envelope was sealed with dark purple wax and the image of a star. Alex slit the envelope open and read the letter inside. Master Alexander Taylor Esk. Dear Alex, I hope you won't mind if I call you Alex, as our mutual friend, Bregnest, told me that I should. Alex, I know that right now you'd like nothing more than to be starting a new adventure. However, I must insist that you return home to your stepfather's house. I don't have time to go into details now, but I will explain everything to you as soon as I can. Yours in fellowship, Waylon Vankin. Alex wondered how Vankin would know he would be in the adventurer's shop this morning. He also wondered why the letter was signed Yours in Fellowship, which didn't mean anything to him.
"I suppose Waylon knows what he's talking about," said Bregnest when Alex showed him the letter. "He may have his own ways, and I'll admit he sometimes acts oddly, but he knows more than most. You should do what he says."
Alex nodded and put Vankin's letter inside his magic bag. Looking toward the door of the shop, he realized it was time to say goodbye. "You'll want to change, then," said Mr. Clutter, carrying a tray of tea and cakes into the room. "No good going home looking like that." Alex looked down at himself and realized he was still wearing his traveling gear, including the true silver dagger that Umbar had given him. He wondered what Mr. Roberts would say if he turned up looking like this. "Just in here," said Mr. Clutter, directing Alex to another door. "You can put your old things on and be ready to go." Alex walked through the door and noticed that his clothes suddenly felt strangely loose. Looking at himself in a nearby mirror, he saw that his hair, which had grown long during his adventure, was as short as it had been when he'd first entered Mr. Clutter's shop. The change had happened so quickly, Alex hadn't noticed the magic around him. Laughing in surprise, Alex changed back into his old clothes. He carefully folded his traveling clothes and stored them in his bag, wondering when he would need them again. For several minutes he looked at his silver dagger, unwilling to put it away. He thought once more of his friends in Vargland and the amazing adventures he'd had. With a sigh, he slipped the beautiful dagger into his bag and put this adventure away with it. Looking at the mirror, he saw himself exactly as he had been the afternoon he'd walked into Mr. Clutter's shop. The only difference was that now he carried a leather bag over one shoulder.
Well, you do look different,
commented Thrang, eyeing him as he emerged from the changing room. Not as scared as he looked the first time we saw him, Archon added. And not as doubting either, said Alex. I'd like to thank you both for choosing me.
Haven't you learned anything?
Thrang laughed.
We didn't choose you. It was the sign.
I know, said Alex, laughing as well. It took a long time for him to say goodbye to Thrang, Archon, and Bregnest. Alex felt sad as he walked to the front door of the shop alone. His friends waved as he opened the door, and he turned to say one last goodbye.
Go on, then,
Thrang said loudly.
You've got work to do, remember?
Alex raised his hand and then stepped through the door and back onto Sylvan Lane. He turned his steps toward the Happy Dragon, wondering if he should tell Mr. Roberts about his adventure. He had no idea how he could possibly explain it all, so in the end, he decided not to say anything at all. As he walked toward the tavern, Alex realized he was really happy to be home. He would miss his new friends and the fun he'd had on his adventure, but he belonged here too, and he was glad to be back. When he reached the back door of the tavern, he wasn't surprised to find Todd waiting for him. "Sorry about the glasses, Alex," he said, smiling weakly. "Didn't mean for Dad to yell at you." "It's all right," said Alex, returning the smile. "Hey, where'd you get this?" Todd asked, noticing Alex's magic bag and reaching his hand out to touch it.
"Leave it!"
Mr. Roberts boomed so loudly that both Todd and Alex jumped. Mr. Roberts stood behind Todd, looking at Alex with a stunned expression on his face and rubbing his hands together nervously.
"Todd, go help in the kitchen,"
Mr. Roberts ordered. "Alex, you come with me." Alex wondered if Mr. Roberts was still mad about the broken glasses. He remembered how loudly his stepfather had yelled so long ago, and then he reminded himself that it hadn't been that long ago. It had only been earlier today. Following his stepfather, Alex climbed up the stairs to the second floor of the tavern to Mr. Roberts' study. Alex was uncomfortable because normally neither he nor Todd was allowed in this room. Mr. Roberts closed the door behind them, moved to his desk, and turned to look at Alex as he sat down. For what seemed a long time, Mr. Roberts didn't say anything at all.
"So,"
he finally said,
"you've been on an adventure then?"
Alex's jaw dropped and his eyes grew to twice their normal size. How could Mr. Roberts possibly know about his adventure? Mr. Roberts smiled, laughing at Alex's stunned look. He got up and walked to the closet, continuing to knuckle himself as he went. Unlocking the door, he removed 2 items from the top shelf, items Alex instantly recognized as magic bags.
"Your mother insisted that I never encourage you,"
said Mr. Roberts, returning to his seat.
"Thought I might give you wild ideas and send you off on dangerous adventures."
"What are you talking about?"
"I suppose I should tell you everything, but it's quite a long story,"
Mr. Roberts said.
"For now, I'll tell you that I was once an adventurer. Never went on many adventures, though, and never had a great deal of luck finding treasure. Your dad, now he was an adventurer."
"My father was an adventurer?" Alex asked, almost numb from the information Mr. Roberts was telling him.
"Of course,"
said Mr. Roberts.
"A great adventurer if ever there was one. In the end, though, his luck ran out. That's why your mother asked me to never tell you about it."
"She didn't want me to know about my father?"
"Not until you were ready,"
Mr. Roberts replied.
"She didn't know you would be an adventurer, and if you weren't, how could she tell you about your dad?"
"I see," said Alex, 1,000 new questions racing through his mind.
"Your dad was sick when he got back from his last adventure. I never thought sickness would get him. Trolls, maybe, or goblins, but never sickness,"
Mr. Roberts said sadly.
"After your dad crossed the wall, your mom came and stayed here. I had been close to both your mom and dad, so I agreed to play the part of your stepfather. I knew your mom loved your dad too much to ever marry again, but I also knew she needed someone to help look after you, and, well, it was the least I could do for my friends."
"But," Alex stammered.
"I know it's a lot to take in all at once,"
said Mr. Roberts, nodding.
"Going on your first adventure, then finding out your dad was an adventurer too. Now that you've been chosen, I suppose I need to give you this."
Mr. Roberts held out one of the magic bags from the closet. Alex looked at the bag, then at Mr. Roberts, then at the bag again.
"It was your father's,"
said Mr. Roberts with a smile.
"You're his heir, so the bag, and what's in it, belongs to you."
"Shouldn't I be offering you a reward for returning it?" Alex asked. Mr. Roberts smiled.
"I see you've learned about returning lost bags."
"Yes," said Alex.
"That's good,"
said Mr. Roberts.
"But you don't need to offer a reward for this bag, because it was never lost. After all, your dad came home and everything. I've just been keeping it for you."
"Do you know what's in it?"
"No, I don't,"
answered Mr. Roberts, scratching his chin thoughtfully.
"The bag didn't belong to me. Your mom told me the passwords before she... well,
died, Alex said softly. Mr. Roberts nodded.
It's time for you to accept your father's bag.
But, Alex started.
But nothing. Your parents would be proud to know you had been chosen and have gone on an adventure without any help or encouragement. Your mom only insisted on not telling you because she didn't want you to be disappointed. You know, if you weren't chosen.
Alex smiled at Mr. Roberts as he took his father's bag and listened to the passwords. This was something he had never expected, not even in his wildest dreams. Now he was excited to tell Mr. Roberts everything that had happened to him and everything he had learned on his adventure.
We've got plenty of time,
said Mr. Roberts.
And I have a few tales for you about your dad and the things he did.
May I ask you something, sir? Alex asked.
Anything at all,
Mr. Roberts replied. I'm not sure how the choosing works, but since my dad was an adventurer and I was chosen, does that mean Todd will be an adventurer too?
I don't know,
replied Mr. Roberts, considering the question.
He doesn't really seem the type. And anyway, it doesn't seem to happen just because your father or mother were adventurers. I don't think anyone knows exactly how the choosing works.
Alex nodded, wondering if Mr. Roberts had ever told Todd about any of his adventures.
I suspect you've got things to do,
said Mr. Roberts as he moved toward the door.
You'll probably spend the rest of the day taking a look at your father's bag. You can tell me about your adventure another time.
Alex sat thinking for a long time. Of all the surprises he'd had on his first adventure, this was the biggest and the best. Excitement flooded him as he held his father's magic bag in his hands and softly spoke the magic word that would let him enter. He was about to discover something about the father he'd never known, and he thought that this might be an even better adventure than the one he had just finished.